For as much hatred as they garner from the gaming community, I don't think I've met anyone who truly hates mobile games, in the same way that I've never met anyone who hates PC games or even console games. The platform isn't what turns people off, it's what's on the platform. So when I say I really hate mobile games, what I'm trying to say is that mobile games always seem to have the same foibles, and I'm not willing to look past them. Their shortcomings tend to outweigh whatever they have to offer me in exchange for my time and money, which isn't to say that mobile games are inherently bad or inferior, I just have a strong bias against them. Keep that in mind when I say that Power Hover is absolutely worth playing, regardless of whether you play it on PC or mobile. And for those of you who share my distaste for mobile games, I'm asking you to keep that in mind because this isn't a game that happened to release on both platforms. This is an iOS and Android auto runner that was ported to PC and added to the Steam store over a year after its initial release. Now, none of that is particularly notable information. Steam has seen dozens, if not hundreds of ports from mobile over the years, and I wasn't expecting much when I picked it up during the Steam summer sale for 59 cents. It looked mildly interesting, it was cheap, and I was sold. But Power Hover shattered my expectations, and it took me a little while to figure out why it caught me so off guard and why I enjoyed it so much, especially considering just how few mobile games I actually like. Narrowing it down, there are three aspects that set this game apart in my mind and elevate it above what I usually find on the App Store. The first one is its use of concrete goals rather than abstract objectives and what I call a non-arbitrary scoring system. Video games have this habit of inflating scores because 100 points for Stompy and Goomba sounds a lot better than 10, and mobile games frequently inflate their scores for the same reason. But if you're not into chasing high scores, and I'm not, then the numbers quickly become meaningless. To put it in terms of fractions, 380,000 is a pretty high number, but when the denominator is infinity, well, it doesn't matter how high that number is. I'd rather have something like 36 out of 39, at least there's a frame of reference for a score like that, which is why I appreciate how Oddrock, the developers of Power Hover, score players here. Power Hover is primarily composed of short, distinct levels that have players collecting batteries to restore power to the main character's village. Each level has a specific number of batteries, normally between 20 to 40, with a 3-star rating given at the end based on how many batteries the player collected. It's not necessary to collect every battery to get 3 stars on a level, but I found myself restarting levels trying to make that perfect run more than once. I suppose it doesn't help replay value, but having clear, attainable goals makes those goals much more enticing without coming across as manipulative. For anyone interested in testing their skills, Power Hover also has 5 endless runner levels in its campaign and a separate challenge mode. Both offer a totally different experience than what's available in the game's main levels, and competitive players may enjoy chasing high scores in these levels, but they're not the reason I stuck with this game. The reason I went back to collect every battery I could is because Power Hover feels good to play, and that's true of both the mainline story levels and the challenge mode, but there's more to this title than chasing high scores. It's a little more nuanced than that. These days, it's hard to grab someone's attention while they're browsing Google Play or the App Store, and the predominant strategy for standing out is being bold. Sometimes that's done through minimalistic or cartoonish aesthetic design, and other times through high-fidelity graphics, but there isn't as much in between the two. I was convinced that Power Hover would fall into the former category. The pictures and trailer on its Steam page certainly look like other games I've seen on the App Store. Where Power Hover differentiates itself though is in its execution. Its graphical style is nice to look at, but what really sells it are the smooth, sweeping camera shots across the landscapes, and the way the player character glides across the ground, or how each environment is dotted with remnants of a long-abandoned civilization. Power Hover is stylistically simple, but not in the way that so many other mobile games are. It's not a minimalist's wet dream or a caricature of the coming robot apocalypse. This isn't a game full of empty wastelands with a few obstacles and traps scattered about, and it's not a commentary on the nature of technology told through environmental details or paragraphs of impenetrable text. Power Hover isn't complicated or grandiose in its ambitions, but it takes effort to design simplicity. That's why we have Square Enix characters. Deserted cities, murky coves, and ice-covered mountains aren't environments unique to Power Hover, but I can't say I've seen places like these outside of Power Hover. From its gameplay to its soundtrack, Power Hover maintains this aura of nuanced simplicity without ever becoming sterile or bland. Even as levels become more challenging, style isn't sacrificed for substance, or vice versa. Surfing through waterfalls and across sand dunes is as beautiful as it is hazardous, but the danger doesn't detract from the beauty like I expected it to. If anything, they complement each other. With the exception of the final level, nearly every stage strikes the perfect balance of challenging auto runner and mellow collectathon, never veering too far into either. and I would attribute Power Hover's success in that regard to the great deal of restraint it shows. Temptation is something that all of humanity has to deal with, but I think game designers have it worse than most of us. During development, there are a million decisions they have to make, and one of the most tempting choices is to add more stuff. More levels, more mechanics, more hats, more microtransactions, and more reasons to play for just another 5 minutes. But Power Hover doesn't indulge the darker temptations of mobile gaming, either in how it escalates during the story mode or how it keeps players engaged, because the most common solution to both of those problems is the same. The easiest way to increase difficulty in an auto runner is to increase the player's speed and throw more obstacles at them, regardless of whether they can realistically react to those obstacles in time. And the current design trend to keep players engaged is to bombard them with achievements, unlockable costumes, daily missions, high score notifications, and a dozen other things that distract from an otherwise mediocre game. In both cases, quality is being substituted with quantity, and Power Hover isn't totally innocent here. Challenge mode is obnoxiously difficult, as are the endless boss levels that pop up in story mode, but the requirement to pass the boss levels is low, and the challenge mode is entirely optional. However, outside of the infinite runner-style levels, obstacles are carefully considered and placed, leading to an altogether more balanced experience. Even during their most frantic moments, Power Hover's main levels are easy to follow, visually stunning, and fun to play. That can't be said for a lot of mobile games, which is why they need to rely so heavily on keeping players hooked with unlockables and daily rewards, things that Power Hover doesn't really concern itself with. It doesn't need to. Like I said earlier, this isn't a title with much replay value. I've played Power Hover for 3 hours, and I'm probably not going to pick it up again, but I enjoyed those hours. I won't deny that Power Hover could have done more, but games have to end eventually, and it's not worth dragging them out until they become never-ending chores. From start to finish, Power Hover is refreshing and fun because the intention and care put into its design wasn't focused on manipulating players. Instead, Power Hover uses its strong visuals and fluid gameplay to engage players for its brief runtime, and then ends before those players lose interest. Despite its brevity though, Power Hover is an excellent mobile game, and more importantly an excellent video game. It avoids the pitfalls of mobile gaming, demonstrating a self-awareness that's rare these days, and offers an exceptional experience on mobile devices and PC that's well worth playing, even if, like me, you really hate mobile games.